Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hello, I'm Dwayne Davison on behalf of the Valparaiso International Center of the Vic. Welcome to our fourth Friday. It's the fourth Friday of the month. It's our fourth Friday presenting culture for you. And tonight we have Sweden. So who is here for Sweden tonight? All right, good. You're in the right spot. So, as you were coming in, you may have heard a little-known band called ABBA. I think they were maybe the most famous band in the entire world. But little-known fact, Frida is the lead singer of that, and she's only the second most famous Frida in the room, because my wife's name is Frida, so yeah, only the second most famous she is. So anyway, we have some coffee over there, so if you like, go ahead and grab that any time. We're going to have some sticky cake later, but coffee's available kind of any time. If you are falling asleep, Nick is going to whack you with a ruler, so get some coffee to prevent that from happening. We have an email list over there. If you did not get an email invite for this, or if you're not on our Facebook or website, valpovic.org, please sign up on our email list over there, as you like. We're going to go till 8:30, we're going to have some question and answers at the end. So unless it's a dire situation, just keep those questions kind of towards the end. And just wanted to remind you again that our biggest event of the year, World Cultural Festival, is Sunday, September 17th, downtown Central Park Plaza and Pavilion. We welcome your input, volunteer suggestions. If you've got ideas for cultural organizations, booths, entertainment, please let myself know, or one of our board members who's here today. So on we go with Sweden. So very few times in our presentations, and we've done close to 50 different countries throughout the last almost 15 years. We've done some countries more than once, of course, but almost 50 countries, different ones. But very few times have we had the opportunity to say that the country we're presenting on has an immigration history within Porter County. So it's kind of unique in that regard. So as I understand it, the Swedes started coming in the 1840s up until the 1920s. The kind of turning point was in 1871, there was the Great Chicago Fire, and during that time, the entire Swedish community got leveled in Chicago, and many of them immigrated over to Porter County. And I think Joseph Bailey, one of our homesteaders here for Porter County, was bringing lots of laborers over and clearing all the forest that was there and getting farms going, and a lot of that was Swedish labor. And then most well known, probably the Shellberg family. So right now, if you go to Indiana Dunes National Park, there's the Shellberg farm and barn and outbuildings. You can tour those during the holidays, and especially June 21st and December 21st when they have Swedish celebrations there. So the Shellbergs kind of helped settle the land, and they weren't the first ones by any means, but one of the more famous ones just because their name is on that farm right now. So anyway, that's kind of interesting in my book that very few countries we can say, hey, really settled in Porter County. A lot settled in Lake County, and they came over time, but this is unique. So. Right now, we're going to introduce to you Mr. Niclas Erhardt. Nick is here with his wife, Devin, who I think we have this up here because Nick represents Sweden, and although he tells me that his wife, Devin, is from New Jersey, I'm pretty sure that is the United States, but having known many New Jersey folks over the years, It is kind of a foreign country for me from the Midwest, but we'll count it as the United States, right? So welcome, Devin. So Nic is the Dean of the Business School at Valparaiso University. Long history of academics at University of Maine and Cornell and others. As you know from the last presentation on Canada, I'm a big hockey fan. Wouldn't you know, he came over playing hockey amongst many other sports. But Nic has been here for a few years as the Dean of the Business School. He'll be here after the presentation, should you want to have your picture with him, autograph.
Really? It's going to cost you money, but yeah,
it may.
Donated to the institute.
So anyway, with that in mind, please welcome Nic Erhardt.
Thanks, man. Just checking, is this where you want me? So I'm still in the camera, in the view? Okay, all right. This is amazing. Look at all you. I had never fathomed that this room would be filled with you guys, and I really appreciated you taking the time on a Friday, 7 o'clock, to come listen to me, really, about Sweden. So, you know, I've been in the U.S. since 1995. And so this opportunity, so that's a long time, obviously. I lived in New Jersey, I lived upstate New York, Iowa, and Maine, and now Valparaiso University, or Valparaiso, sorry. So when Hugh and Dwayne approached me to ask me to give this talk, I was flattered. And looked at my schedule, oh boy, this is going to be, can I do this? And of course I said, yes, this is going to be great. And so I really appreciate this exercise. Like I said, I've been here for, 27 years or so? And so going through and knowing that I have about an hour and 15 minutes to talk about Sweden, that's exciting, but what am I going to say? Like how can I distill a country into an hour and 15 minutes? And so it's been fun, but it's been challenging to figure out, okay, what's the most relevant piece that people want to hear about? And so I'm reminiscent, I've engaged with my family, my friends, telling them I'm giving this talk about Sweden, so they've been sending me information, pictures, videos. So it's been a great way, too, to connect with friends and family on the other side of the pond. And so you know, I learned early on in psychology, which was my minor, about cross-cultural issues. My professor back then that I happened to do research with, Camila Garcia, his number one piece of advice was culture is unquestionable. What did he mean with that? Culture is unquestionable. Well, it means that as soon as you start talking negative about somebody's culture, they become defensive. All right? And that's what he meant. And so I've taken that to heart, and this is an hour and 15 really about celebration of Sweden. Of course, Sweden has a lot of issues, a lot of challenges, but I think it's a lot more fun to talk about what we do well and what we're famous for. So bear with me. I'm sure you'll have a question later on about NATO and shootings and and things like that. But it's all good. We can handle that later. But Let's jump forward. So 1995, I came, well, let me move backwards, really. 1995, I decided to make a shift from Stockholm, Sweden, a suburb that I grew up in, playing ice hockey at a fairly competitive level. Some would say it's semi-professional. I got a little bit paid to play ice hockey. The challenge with sports in Sweden, back then anyway, was you kind of have to make a choice between education and sports if you want to be serious. All right? And in the U.S. system has a very nicely integrated NCAA way of combining both education and sports. And so I took that opportunity as a way to try something new, jump over to the U.S. I did not play at Maine. This is me, 10 years ago? Not even. 5 years ago, I was asked to, I hadn't been on the ice for 16 years as a goalie, and it was a fundraiser for a fallen police officer in the community, and they say, hey, Nic, we need a goalie. And so I I said, okay, sure. It's going to be ugly, but I'll jump in. And sure enough, after about 3 minutes, I pulled the groin. 16 years of not playing, you know, goalies, we're supposed to be flexible, right? No, that wasn't. So I played ice hockey in the beginning, but then I realized that, you know, I'm not going to be a professional. It's great to play ice hockey, a great way to find friends and get, you know, embraced in the community, but I quickly learned and realized that, you know, I'm not going to waste this education. So I decided to quit ice hockey. And that was probably one of the toughest decisions that I've ever made. With the team needing you, they had a goalie shortage, and me thinking long-term about education. And so that was, I will always remember that, a big challenge. And academically, I excelled. I graduated from Cornell. I have 2 master's degrees, PhD from Rutgers. And I'll talk later about the fact that as Swedes, we can't brag. But my research, you know, I've been cited 6,000 times. I've got 27 articles or so, and it's been a really interesting journey, and landing here as dean now at the College of Business, fantastic. So anyway, bear with me. My lovely wife, Devin DeMarco, you want to stand up and just say hello? My better half, New Jersey, and she's also an attorney. If you need a lawyer, here she is. Okay. We don't have children. We kind of do. This is it. This is Ralph. We spent 12 years in Maine. And we learn all the trails and hikings, and what better way to do that with your dog? And so he obviously had the fluorescent vest on in case some hunters would think of him as a, raccoon or whatever. Yeah. But he's larger than life, and yeah, should say we've been married for 10 years, by the way. So thank you. I don't understand why you stick by me, but anyway, yeah. Okay, so Swedish flag. So we have an example of the Swedish flag. A lot of folks confuse this with Ukraine. It's not Ukraine, this is Sweden. Now, the color of the flag has actually changed over time. It used to be a lot darker, the blue. And now this is more the official one. As you can see, this is an official flag. By the way, this is made by my brother-in-law, who owns a little Swedish flag company. And so he sent me this flag. And as you see, it's fairly light blue. And it's supposed to symbolize the sky of Sweden, blue sky. And the reason why it turned from darker to lighter, the argument is we've switched from cotton-based flags to synthetic flags. Cotton flags, they faded in the sun, and so we made them darker so that they can keep up with the sunlight. But anyway, so we have our 4th of July is June 6th, which is really, and that came about not so long ago. That was in the 80s that we decided, well, shouldn't we have our own national holiday like everybody else? What should we celebrate? Well, let's turn the Swedish National Day into a celebration. So June 6th, I'll come back to midsummer because that's really what Swedes think should be the national holiday. Anyway, okay, stereotypes of Swedes. Anybody has some suggestions?
Swedish bikini team.
I had that picture up there, and then my wife said to take it down, so that's gone.
Meatballs.
Meatballs. We eat it a lot, and they're small and tiny, with mashed potatoes, gravy, and lingonberry. Big piece there. Anything else?
Long summer days.
Long summer days, true.
Muppets.
We sound like the Swedish chef on the Muppet Show. I totally disagree, but apparently we do. Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's see what we got. Fish for breakfast. I ran this by my Swedish friends, and I said, yeah, that could happen. It sounds weird, but it could actually happen. You know, stereotypes, what's fun about stereotypes is that they're grounded in some reality, right? And as we look at it as a collective, but when we go at the individual level, it typically is not true, but in this case, I think it's fairly true. Tall, blue-eyed blondes. Whenever I go home, I feel very short. And I'm almost 6 feet. Right? Almost. Like if I stand up, right? But most of my friends, and I don't know why, maybe it's the fish that plays into it. Heavy drinkers? Yeah, I think so. I think the Scandinavians, the Swedes, we typically drink a lot in short spurts. So Friday, Saturday, as opposed to the continent, Italy, Spain, France, who is more social, small amount, but regularly, regular during the day. And we'll talk more about alcohol later. Everyone loves ABBA. It's not true. But we're proud of them. And if you ever go to Stockholm, there's an ABBA museum in Stockholm. That's really cool. It's very interactive. We took a bunch of students there a few years ago. You can even be part of a music video and singing. It's pretty fantastic, actually. Volvo is the only car in Sweden. No, but there's a lot of them. And we'll talk a little bit more about safety, but you'll see a lot of them, obviously. Unemotional. I think that's true. We're not the Italian speaking, and we're not, suicidally depressed. That's a myth. But by the way, you can fact check me. Some of this is my own interpretation, some of it is facts, yeah, I'm just saying that don't hold me accountable for everything I say. I'm trying my best here. Again, I've been in the US for 27 years and trying my best here. Meatballs for dinner every night. Somebody mentioned that already, so fantastic. Swedish core values. Equality. There is a law in Sweden, in Scandinavia I would say, about, we call it the law of gentelag. The gentelag is, don't think that you're somebody. Don't brag. It's a taboo thing. And I'm not sure where that is coming from. Maybe it's Lutheranism. I don't know what it is, but and it also comes to in a way that making money, historically anyway, in Sweden is because of our tax system, it's hard to make money, hard to be very wealthy. So if you're rich, you must have done something illegal. The only way really to make money in Sweden back then is winning the lottery or being an athlete. Right, that's it. Yeah, anyway, so efficiency, hard work. Swedes work hard, play hard. And I think efficiency comes into our short summers, long winters, and really trying to be as productive as possible during the summer and figuring out ways to work smarter, not harder necessarily. Collective, since we do pay a lot of taxes, people are also very invested in how we spend it. And I think the core value here really is about the wealthy and the healthy takes care of the poor and sick. And that's, I think it's a very, very important core value of Sweden. And I think it's still very true. Safety, coming here back then, I used to really be upset driving on the highway and looking at how people are strapping things on their roofs and putting mattresses and just holding it like this, going, we're fine here. And I think this goes back to Volvo and just being mindful. Fast facts. A nice gentleman put up this map of Scandinavia. Sweden is kind of in the center here. We are a kingdom. Our population is a little bit more than 10 million. If it wasn't for immigration, we would actually be shrinking. So I don't know exactly the stats on number of kids in Sweden, but I think it's less than one. Official language, Swedish. Currency, Swedish krona. We did not join the euro here, and right now, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending if you're an exporter or importer, the Swedish krona is historically super weak right now. So this is a good time to go. Yeah, you can get a lot for your money in Sweden right now. So the companies that are exporting are really having a great time. Not so much for imports and retail, and Swedes wanted to buy products from abroad. Capital city, Stockholm. The GDP, if you want to know that, it's about 500 and some billion down in 2017. Largest country in Scandinavia, and we're 5th in Europe. And yet we're not that many people, right? So it's a lot of, there's a lot of land, a lot of forest, it's a very long country, and if you think of it, over 900 miles. So if you put Sweden on top of the US, you'll see, if you guys have been to Maine, let's say Bangor, Maine, which we spent 12 years at, and Sweden would go all the way down to, I'd say, North Carolina, Elon. So think about that, how many states that Sweden crosses, right? So it's a very, very long country, and there's a huge coastal line, 2,000 miles of coast, and I think one of the things that really stands out for Sweden is the coastal line and the archipelago. We have thousands of small islands around the coast of Sweden, and if you ever go to Sweden, make sure you have a tour and get out in the archipelago with one of the boats, have lunch, have dinner, and it is just a spectacular view, and you won't regret it for sure. Hang on. Okay. Now, can you relate to this? Do you know the difference between Sweden and Switzerland?
One has money, one doesn't.
Which one? Well, yeah. Thanks, Stu. I don't know really why there is such big confusion about the two countries, because we are very far apart. The flag has nothing to do with each other. The only similarities in the name is the SW, I guess. We don't have fondue. Well, we do, but that's not what we do. I mean, we have meatballs, and we don't make any watches necessarily. We're both neutral. Historically, now we're trying to join NATO, but yeah. Switzerland has the Alps, the yodeling, we don't, all right? And they got a lot more skiing area than we do. I think one of the surprises when people go to Sweden, and when you land on Arlanda is, you'll be surprised how flat it is, you know? And so you gotta go hours and hours and hours north to really see some mountains and ski resorts. We do have ski resorts. We do have, but it's not as impressive as the Alps in Switzerland, in part because of the Ice Age pressing down our mountains to become kind of mounds rather than sharp edges of the really spectacular Alps. So anyway, so keep that in mind. We're different, okay? Could you draw countries on this map? I'm just curious. I don't think my wife would be able to do it, but anyway, at some point, I'm going to throw this to my students and see whether they can do it. Scandinavia, what is Scandinavia? People think, I think there's a confusion between Scandinavia and Sweden. Scandinavia it really is a region. It's an association between countries that are geographically linked together. So the strongest ties, I would say, is Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. That's the sort of the classic Scandinavian countries. And so there's even an airline, Scandinavian Airlines, that includes these three countries. But in reality, it really includes, you know, both Iceland, we have the Faroe Islands, Finland is part of it. Greenland typically is not, even though it kind of belongs to Denmark. But yeah, don't think of this as a country. This is a region. This is just an area. And so one thing to take away from this important talk is this notion, right? Just kidding. We have a royal family. Over here, somebody can fact check, so this is King Carl Gustav the 16th. We have, so it's a constitutional monarch, and you are royalty by birth, and we've changed the laws so that the firstborn, regardless of gender, is now the heir of the throne. So the next king of Sweden will be a queen. All right, so Crown Princess Victoria and Princess Madeleine, and she has married actually an American. So she met him in, I think in college, tend to happen, right? I actually blanking on his name, but somebody can fact check and see who that guy is. So they live in a castle right down in central Stockholm. I should backtrack a little bit about the family here, the House of Bernadotte. So 1810. So you might be familiar with the Vasas, right? Gustav Vasa. For a few centuries, there was a royal family, the Vasas, that ruled the country. And so what happened, and arguably we don't really know who the first king is. It goes way back, and the problem is that Sweden was small kingdoms at the time, so it's hard to really pinpoint who was the real Swedish king. But at some point, early 1800s, the royal blood, there was a king that couldn't produce an heir or had a stillborn, and a child died. And so we were out of luck in terms of finding a bloodline royalty. So what was going on in Europe 1810? Revolution and Napoleon, right? So being worried about being taken over by Napoleon's army, so what do? You align yourself with the great general, the great Napoleon, and ask him to anoint the future king of Sweden. So Napoleon anointed and gave the head to a French general to become the king of Sweden. And so the bloodline goes back to France. And I think Stockholm, Sweden, in a way, they think of themselves as sort of the Paris of the North. And our cuisine, our food, is also somehow related to the traditions in the French cooking. If you look at the Danish and the Finnish and the Norwegian food, it's very different, I would say. But anyway, the castle, big one. It's kind of when I showed my wife the castle in Stockholm, my wife was not very impressed. She expected a lot more. What happened, and I'm blanking on the exact year, but for generations, the Three Crown Castle that it was called had been built and expanded by each king. Each king had a piece and said, okay, I'm going to expand here and there. So it became a really impressive castle. Well, one night the entire castle went out in flame. And so we rebuilt, but it was sort of, okay, it's hard to replicate, so this is what we're going to do. So I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but yeah. So a lot of the paintings, a lot of the arts went up in flame. So we still saved some of it, and if you go, there is a museum attached to the basement of the palace. So the palace, downtown Stockholm, and so I'm trying to infuse a little bit of Swedish folks who are aware of this presentation and you guys, and so I've asked some family and friends to send some greetings. So just to mix it up, and this is my. We went to school together from first class to the 9th class, so 9 years together. And so here she is and saying hello to you guys. And right now there is no sound. We try it again. There is no sound. What do we do, Tom? We're out of luck. We're out of luck.
Is it coming out of the laptop? We can put the microphone up to it if it is.
That's it. Oh. What could we do?
If you can do it there, I'll put the mic on it.
Okay. Let's see.
Stockholm. Isn't this just beautiful? Hi, my name is Kiki, and I am currently in Stockholm. Isn't this just beautiful?
It's unfortunate. We're going to try again.
And this is where the king lives. Bye.
Even higher. Okay, here we go.
Hi, my name is Kiki.
Technology issues. Greetings from Sweden.
Hi, my name is Kiki, and I am currently in Stockholm. Isn't this just beautiful?
So she says, hello, I'm standing outside downtown Stockholm,
And this is where the king lives.
and that's where the king lives. And the king really, they have two palaces, one just outside Stockholm, which is really the fancy one that I haven't taken you to yet. But to show the public that the king is home, they put a flag up. So every time you walk by and you see a full flag at the top of the castle, you know the king is home, right? And his job, his family, really opens and closes the House of Parliament, or Riksdag, as we call it. And the job really for him is being a marketer, really, to promote Sweden. So he's a lot of ribbon cutting and representing the country, attending events. And of course, we're going to talk about the Nobel Prize in a bit, but he's very much part of that celebration. We talked a little bit about kings, and arguably King Gustav Adolf is the first, or at least one of the first, king of Sweden. And back then, in the 1600s, Sweden, most of us think of Sweden as being pacifist, neutral. We don't want war. But at the time, for a couple of hundred years, Sweden was actually a powerhouse in terms of conquering. So a lot of land, a lot of countries. Sweden, we went into Germany, Poland, Finland. At some point, we occupied part of Norway. And so the request from King Gustav at the time, a little bit before 1628, was, I need a big ship. I need to show off our military power, to scare everybody away. And so he ordered this big giant ship called the ship Vasa. These ships were built of oak wood. And back then, oak, you were not allowed to cut down any oak trees. Oak is the hardest wood that we can find in Scandinavia, in Sweden. And so that wood was really reserved for the king's fleet, because they can take a little bit more wear and tear and some cannonballs, I guess. Now, because he wanted this built, so they added a lot of layers in terms of cannons, not just one floor, but second floor, and they really pimped out this ship to the max, okay, to really show it off. Now, you might be familiar with this story. It sank 20 minutes in to his maiden voyage in the central harbor of Stockholm. And so, as a business professor, I've used this as a case study as a massive managerial failure by epic proportion. And the funny part is that we now have a museum, and this is out of display, and we're celebrating it. But it's really about failure, right? So as they were building it and getting it seaworthy, they were testing its capacity. And so the way they did that is to take the crew, the builders, in the harbor, and they're running back and forth on the deck to get the ship, see how much it actually moves. And what they quickly found out was that, oh, we got to stop this because we're about to tilt over, as they were sitting at the harbor. Well, the king at the time, nobody had the guts to tell him. And it was all finger pointing. But anyway, 20 minutes in, 1628, the ship sank, and I don't know how many hundreds of crew members died. Back then, nobody really knew how to swim. This day, it's a fundamental educational piece in the Swedish school system. Everybody has to learn to swim. And so part of the humiliation, though, was also as the ship sank, the masts were sticking up, even at when the boat was at the bottom. So the king ordered the mast to be sawed down because he didn't want to see this failure, right? It was an insult to the king, right? And so what's interesting with the Wassership, we rediscovered it, I think back in the 60s. We came across this ship, and because of the brackish water in the Swedish archipelago, it had preserved it almost perfectly for hundreds of years. So we raised it up and we built a museum, and now you can go there and you can check it out. Sometimes they have dinners around it, but it really is a epic failure of managerial. Fun fact, interesting fact, censorship. Sweden was the first one to adopt censorship or abolish censorship. And in order to celebrate the fact that apparently the government trusts its citizen to speak freely, a few years ago, they introduced, to really promote Sweden and celebrating the few hundred years of censorship, they adopted what we call a random suite. So you can sign up as a Swedish person to get a call from someone abroad for free, and they can ask you anything. So what did I do? Well, I was teaching a class at the time, and I decided to call a random Swede in one of my classes. So we have a classroom of Americans mostly, and we're calling a random Swede in Sweden, and it worked pretty well. It was pretty funny, but it's a symbol of the trust and the fact that folks are very outspoken, or at least they don't feel restricted of sharing what they think. I'll jump around a little bit here, but Sweden also has its own indigenous people, the Sami folks, and I'd say probably that is one of the. So these folks live across countries, across Norway, Sweden, Finland, and some part of Russia, and so. Historically, they have supported themselves by herding reindeers, living off the land as nomads for centuries before the other Swedes would appear. I mean, these clearly were here before the others come. And so I'd say this is probably one of the dark history pieces of Sweden. And so there's been a lot of restitutions about figuring out how do we repay because back then they were trying to assimilate, integrate, and become normal Swede. But these are really interesting group of folks that identify themselves as the Sami folks. Okay, Swedish Vikings. What do we know about them?
They raided the entire world.
Almost.
They went to Russia.
Yes. When were they active? 800, 1200? Okay, so they were a few hundred years. They were expert sailors. Here's an example of a boat. And what's interesting with this boat is that it's very shallow. Right? And why is it shallow? Because if you're going to raid,
The rivers.
you have to get up, and if you're going to raid and getting up to rivers where you can do good raiding, you needed boats that could go in shallow waters. And they can actually also jump, and they can carry the ship. Based on logs, they rolled it, and they can quickly come in and quickly disappear. So they were experts of fast sailing, raiding, pirated. But I think one of the pieces that is not part of the story is that they were actually very good tradesmen. Yeah, they were actually very good tradesmen, very savvy traders. If they realized that you were too big to fight, well, let's start trading, right? And a lot of it, they settled, created a lot of settlements, and in England, the UK, but also we have Viking ancestors going all the way to Constantinople at the time, Constantinople, I'm sorry. And so, yeah, a little bit of that. But I think one of the misunderstandings about what a Viking looks like is that they wore a helmet with horns. And if we would have a real Viking sitting here with us, he or she, by the way, they were both men and female warriors in the Viking tradition. And a lot of the leadership, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But what they would say about this picture is that, why the heck would I wear horns? That doesn't seem very efficient in a battle when I'm running around and my horns are going to get in the way and get tangled up in whatnot. So yeah, so Vikings did not wear horns. Parliamentary system, we have a democratic system. What's the difference here is that we have a multi-party system. It's not a dual one that we have here. And so this is our current Prime Minister, Ulf Kristersson. And now the nice thing of having a multi-party system is that you have some parties that are single issue parties, like the environmental party, for example, and they're pushing their agenda and making sure that that happens, that we're paying attention to the environment sustainability. The challenge, of course, if you have multi-parties is how do you create a government, a ruling body, right? So we have coalitions. Right now we're on a sort of a right-wing coalition. The moderates have, for some reason, the moderates, that's where the Prime Minister is coming from. The Swedish Democrats, I'd say, is the ultra-right, and we've seen a growth in this area for the last few years. I said I was not going to go into politics here, but it is interesting to see how a lot of countries in Europe are shifting more right. But if you look at from a political spectrum compared to the U.S., even the moderates and the Swedes were way left still. We still believe in social health care and universal health care and all that. So, but the other piece is that our vote it's a direct vote. We vote for the party. And whomever party, if you belong to the party, you as a party decides who the Prime Minister or your representative would be. So in the US, we vote for the president, right? We vote for the head of the party, not so much in Sweden. Okay. Personality, what do we know about Swedes? Curt, directness. Swedes are, I would say, yeah, they cut to the point. They kind of focus on the issue. And that goes also into the news. Every morning I read Swedish news. And I do that because I want to stay in contact with my country, and B, it summarizes in a very direct way of what is worth knowing, right? And by the way, it's free. Swedish news is actually a public piece. Swedes tend to be literal, to the point. Yes, very much so. What else can we say? Directness is highly valued. But in terms of criticizing, and I think this is similar in the US, right? Make sure that you don't criticize folks in public and allow it to save face. So a little bit of personality. We can go into that a little later. But consensus and compromise. Egalitarianism is a big piece, as I mentioned at the beginning. When Swedes make decisions, they speak up, but they make decisions as a collective. And it can take some time to actually reach a conclusion because every voice has to be heard. Everyone's opinions need to be considered. And then we make a decision as a group. All right. Reserved, are people, are Swedish unfriendly? Well, I think if you go to Sweden, it's fairly cliquish, if you will. The Swedes know each other since birth, most of us. We live in the same neighborhood, we go to the same school, we've had our friends for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So as a foreigner, I think it's hard to get integrated, to get to know these cliques. Right, and so that could come across as being unfriendly. I don't want to know. I don't want to know your issues. I don't want to hear. If I say, "How are you?" That's a direct, important question, and Swede would answer, generally saying, "Well, actually, I have a little bit of ache in my hip, and yeah, I had a problem sleeping last night, but thanks for asking." In the U.S., what happens? Like, "How are you doing?" Yeah, and that's it. You don't want to. We don't engage. So if you ask the question, be prepared for an answer in Sweden. I guess that's the point, right? And so, yeah. And I think that's an interest. One thing that my impression of living in the U.S. for a long time is how easy it is to move to a different state, to a different town, to get friends. You know, it's quick. People want to know. People are interested in you, and it's really easy to strike up a conversation. Swedes have I think they're a little challenged in that respect. You know, there's a joke in a TV show where in a house where you have flats, people are trying to avoid each other. So they're standing and watching their little peek hole and seeing, is anybody out there? Do I have to talk to them or not? And if they're out there, it's like, shh, okay, let's wait until they pass, and then, okay, let's go out and go. You know, same thing in a bus station. I think if you stand there, two people standing waiting for a bus in Sweden, if you walk up and strike up a conversation, that's not normal, you know. If you sit next to somebody in the subway and you strike up a conversation, that's not normal. They might like it, but typically they'll be like, who is this character? You know, what do you want from me? I'm here in my own space, my own bubble. So, yeah, work versus personal life. And I think there's a distinction there in Sweden. We have our friends for certain purposes. You know, work friends is one thing. I go out with my work colleagues. We go out and have fun. But then I have my other Swedish friends that I've been growing up with since I was, 6 years old. And I think in the U.S., I think it's a lot more fluid. So that's an observation again that you. If my Swedes are watching this, they'll probably say, "Well, I'm not sure about that one," but that's my interpretation. Love of nature. We talked about archipelagos and the lakes. The environmental awareness and unique architecture. We'll talk more about that in just a bit. But there is employers expect employees to take time off and really enjoy and get out. And so when you do, employers respect that. And I think here, you know, I remember working in pharmaceuticals where one colleague was telling me, you know, I'm a little bit afraid of taking vacation here because I'm worried that my boss will notice that he doesn't need me. So I don't want to be taking off 2 weeks or 3 weeks that Swedes do and Europeans in general do. And so big respect on family and time off from work, and I don't answer the phone if I'm on vacation. You know, it's a clear line there. Have you heard of friluftsliv? It's a hard word, isn't it? Friluftsliv. So what does it mean? Open air living. Swedes, and I'd say Scandinavians, are nature lovers. And it goes also to the work-life balance. So if you're not at work, a lot of folks are out and about, hiking, skating, skiing. This is, by the way, a Swedish company. Are you familiar with Fjällräven? The backpack, konken, right? Konken means the carry, or you're carrying. But this is really an important piece of what Swedes, in terms of, I'd say Swedes are healthy in that sense. You know, they're always looking to be walking, biking. This is something that's really big in Sweden in the winter. This is what we call long skating. So the skates here the blade is about this long. And why is it that long? Because you can go faster, right? It's hard to turn. It'd be hard to play ice hockey with those, right? Right, Dave? But so this is a perfect, when there's been some warm temperature, the ice have melted and then it froze again, and so the snow disappeared, and now it's just we call it sort of a glass sheet, and it's a big thing. They wear their pikes to check the depth of the ice, making sure that we're okay here. There's reports out. Everybody wears their safety gear. If you fall through, everybody has their safety line to pull people up. And then you have a bag that's sealed with dry clothing in case you're going through the ice. But yeah, so folks go and they bring their coffee in the thermos and some sandwiches, and they go for a few miles, and then they see a little place to take a little coffee break, and yeah, that's a big thing. Sports in Sweden, as we mentioned, I love sports, and I try to minimize sports in my speech here, but people are very much into exercise, and I think one of the things, if you would go there, you'll notice not only tall, blonde eyes and blue, they're skinny, and so if this is kind of an interesting piece in terms of activities that everybody does sometime in their life almost, right? Whether you run a marathon or something. So we have what we call a Swedish classic, svensk klassiker. Okay, what does that mean? It actually is a combination of races. So the big Vasa race is a 90 kilometers cross-country ski race, ski competition. And it has historical significance. Back then, there was a gentleman that needed to relay a message to the king at the time. And he cross-country skied these 90 kilometers to relay the message. And so this is a yearly contest. There's hundreds of thousands of folks in there. You Google it. It's amazing in terms of the amount of folks. And the other piece, not really sure why, but part of this tradition, you have stages of nurturing station with bananas and such, but a lot of it is blueberry soup. They drink blueberry soup. I guess it's good for eliminating toxins, I guess, but blueberries, I guess that's... So anyway, Vätternrundan is a 300-kilometer biking. Sweden had two big lakes, and Vättern is one of them. And so this race is about biking around this lake, and it's 300 kilometers. And then we have Vansbrosimmet. This is swimming, 6 kilometers swim, and and if you do all four, including running, which is Lidingöloppet, this is a little shorter than a marathon. 30K marathon is run 40, right? So if you do all four of them, you get a medal. And that's the classics, the Swedish classic. So we have foreigners all over from the world coming and doing these events to get and pride themselves and saying, look, I did the Swedish classic. So anyway, other sports that are big here, football. I just changed it. Somebody, was it Hugh? That, yeah, we were going through my slides. Like, well, Nick, you put football. Yeah, you mean soccer, right? It's like, yeah. Yeah, soccer is huge. Everybody, all kids. I mean, it's just part of the culture. And I think in any country, soccer is the biggest sport in the world. And so handball is a weird thing. We're playing with a little ball that we play and toss through a net with a goalie. It's played indoors. Golf is a big one. Athletics, track and field. In the U.S., track and field, I don't think it's that very big. It doesn't really make the news. You know, when we play in the Olympics as Americans, do we watch it? It's not that big, right? We kind of like, okay, so what's the gold medal count here? Like, are we beating Russia? Okay, good, right? I mean, that's the kind of, and so a lot of the elite U.S. Track and field folks, they go abroad, they go to Europe. And they're superstars in Europe. Yeah. Gymnastics, big thing. Ice hockey. You would think ice hockey is bigger, but it's not, Dave. I mean, it's just a lot of folks play it. Basketball, tennis, esports, huge, and floor hockey. But what's going on right now is, I think, is interesting. We're playing this paddleball. You might have heard of pickleball, which is the fastest growing sport in the U.S. right now. And it's a lovely sport. We can play it. An 80-year-old can play with a 70-year-old, and it's great fun. In Europe, it's more paddleball, and I'm not sure why, but apparently pickleball is picking up. Okay. Let's see. Where are we at? Are you staying awake? Are you okay? Coffee? There's going to be cake. Okay. All right. Well, why can't I advance? Let's see. Come on. Boom. Okay. Sports is important for kids. Okay, so here's a clip with sound. Should I try? I think that is probably a better, is that on? No, it wasn't on. Okay, all right, here we go. Let's try this.
Hello, my name is Paula and I'm 7 years old and I love gymnastics.
And I'm Andreas, and I'm a little bit older, and I love this club. And not all Swedes are driving.
That was one of my best friends, Andreas, and Paula, his daughter. And so, yeah, he's very proud of his Jeep. Yeah. So it's true, not everybody speaks or drives Volvos. Let's talk a little bit about income tax. Right? We think of Sweden as being a heavily taxed society, and indeed it is. Right? But I think we need to clarify. So here we have income tax around the world. Sweden is topping the league here, 57% income tax. What do you think of that? That's a lot.
Nice place to visit.
Yeah. Well, it depends. So we have a progressive tax system with a huge marginal tax component. So the average, the more money you make, the more taxes you pay. And it's kind of like similar to the U.S., right? We have tax brackets, right? Right. So in Sweden, if you make less than $50,000 a year, you're in the first tax bracket, and you pay 32%. Reasonable, right? 32%, that's pretty much what we pay here. Isn't that what we are? Oh, we don't pay income tax in India, do we? Yeah, we do. Yeah, small, okay, all right. If you make more than 50,000, your tax goes up with an additional 20%. More than 20%. So if you make more than $50,000 a year, yes, you're up here, okay? And it goes back to the mentality is if you're rich, you should contribute more. You should help the poor and the sick. And I think if you would ask a real Swede here what they think about it, I think they're proud of the tax system. If you make a lot of money, they're not happy to pay a lot of tax, but they still do it because it's part, and they understand the importance of it. But there's also Swedes that are trying to figure out and finagle them way through and trying to minimize taxes, through tax breaks and so. But in general, I think a Swede, they would say, yes, it's a lot, but what do we get from it? If you make $50,000, what do you get from it? And let's talk a little bit about it. So healthcare. Hospital care, basic visit, everyone, a copay is about 10 to 20 bucks to go to anybody. If you don't have health, we don't have health insurance in that sense. Anybody in Sweden, go to the doctors for a basic visit is 10 to 15 bucks. Okay. Patients cover about 3% of surgeries. So 3% of your surgery that you need, that the doctor, in this case, thinks it's necessary, you pay only 3%. Okay? Okay. Prescription drugs, and I think this is really interesting. So, U.S. is famous for having very expensive drugs. There's a lot of American health pharmaceutical companies. We pay probably the highest cost for medication in the world. In Europe and in Sweden, they negotiate and subsidize. So individuals, they pay up to about 120 bucks. After you pay $120 for, first of all, very inexpensive drugs, then the system kicks in. And so if you paid $123, your copay is reduced, and once you pay the full amount, medication is free. So whenever we go back to Sweden, we're trying to figure out, okay, so what medication can I bring home? puffers, inhalers, they're about a third or fourth of the cost here. I mean, it's just, so. Should I have said that on camera? I don't know. Dental care, free dental care for everyone until they're 23 years old. Free. And that includes braces. And I'm not sure. I don't know how do we pay for braces in the U.S. by ourselves? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Okay. And so, as a kid, you're actually called. You get a note in your mail, and your mom and dad says, "Okay, Nick, you have a dental appointment next week at 9 a.m." And okay. And we go and check it. They clean your teeth, and if you have a cavity, they either take care of it right then, or you have to come back. And you wave that little note to your teacher, and they say, "Okay, go ahead and fix your teeth." Right? Yeah, I've had talks with my Swedish friends about dental care and who has the best teeth in the world, and you know, the whole UK, England, and Sweden's like, "No, we have the best teeth in the world." Yeah. I'm going to get comments on this later, I'm sure. Okay, so life expectancy. And I think part of it is, so Sweden has, life expectancy currently is about 83 years old, average, and the US 76. And I was just sitting in a meeting the other day here, and I think depending on where we are in Indiana, in which county, it could be even lower than 76. And part of it is access to emergency health care and birthing centers, which is really a problem in this area. So I think part of why we see 83 is the healthcare piece, right? That for us, healthcare is not linked to a job. Here, it's sort of, I take a job sometimes because they offer me healthcare. In Sweden, is it right? And in fact, if you don't have a job, you probably need healthcare more than someone that does have a job. So that's a very different way of thinking of it. You know, in terms of quality, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'm pretty darn sure that the quality and the speed is still what it should be in an industrial country. So I don't want to get into politics, all right? But pension system, so in Sweden, we have a guaranteed pension, regardless of what you do. So you don't have to be a fireman or police officer. You still have a guaranteed pension, and it's built on your income over your life as an employee, as a worker, that you're contributing through taxes into this pension system. And it's not linked to the stock market. It's a guarantee. So depending if the stock markets go up and down, it doesn't matter. You're still guaranteed. And it's a pay-as-you-go system, so which means that all the folks that are working are now paying the retired folks for their pension. So that's an important distinction of how we do things here. We have occupational pensions. So Sweden is very heavily unionized, and they negotiate additional retirement or pension. So depending on what your occupation is, you also get a bonus there, and then a lot of Swedes then also save by themselves. So this is kind of in a very simple way. If you Google this and read on it, it's complicated, but I think this is the simplest way I can explain the pension system. Educational system, compulsory, 6 years for 9 years. And they take it very seriously. You know, there are some families that want to sell everything they have, buy a sailboat, and sail around the world for 3 years and bring in their kids with them. And the Swedish educational ministry would say, no, you got to tell us how you're going to educate your son and daughter. And so mandatory compulsory schooling. We have what we call gymnasium. This is high school. You can go either for 2 years or 4 years. And then we have university studies. And student loans. So in terms of cost, going to college is next to free, going to university. Now, it's based on your GPA, so it's competitive in that respect. So we have X amount of seats for different majors. But if you do get in, based on your performance in the gymnasium, okay, it's essentially free. And so what Swedes, they still take student loans. Why would they take student loans? Because they have expenses, right? I mean, if you're going full-time as a student, how are you going to afford rent? How can you afford food and entertainment and clothing, and right? And so student loans are heavily subsidized, and the interest rate is about 0.6%. Are you still paying off your student loans? So what's the thought behind subsidized student loans? Well, the idea is that Swedes, we value education. Education helps our society be more competitive. And so we want to encourage you. So we help you. Part of helping you is subsidized loans. And so, in fact, the Swedish, the government, CSN, actually pays Swedish students, and Europeans for that matter, all the Europeans that want to go to study in Sweden can do so for free. And so you're actually getting a check every month for, depending, $400 to $800 a month. It's not a lot of money, but it's symbolic in a way that the government really invests in the future of its workforce in that sense, right? How are we doing on time? 15 minutes. I have 150 slides. How are we going to? And so CSN is the Swedish Board of Student Finance, and so they run this entity, which I think it's interesting. Okay, what else we got? Sustainability. Okay, I'm no expert on sustainability. We have an expert in the room, Dr.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Nope. Her name is Dr. Beth Gingrich. And so thank you for coming. And so I told her later on, I'm sure we have some follow-up questions around sustainability. And I said, I'm going to turn to you because you know more of it. But Sweden goes way back in terms of focusing on the environment and sustainability. 1995, way back. Sweden is, in various ways, in various studies, number one, taking it very seriously. A lot of our friendly neighbors, Finland, Norway, Denmark, I would say we're in it together. Small countries, but the idea is even though what we do doesn't impact that much, at least we're taking a step and we are creating technology that then can be adopted, scaled in other countries to help them with their environmental issues, right? Sustainability focus, energy efficiency, a lot of tax incentives, to change your appliances. Geothermal heating is huge. I remember as a kid, I was 4 or 5 years old. We were drilling to really offset and save money too. Electric vehicles. Sweden, Scandinavia is home of electric vehicles. I think that's one of the observations you'll see if going there. There's a lot, and charging stations all over. We were the first to introduce a carbon tax on oil and gas. Urban farming is a huge thing. We have these gardens, community gardens, and it's a thing. You'll drive around and you see these small little lots all over, and Swedes are very much into it. Now we're into this called vertical gardening. It's sort of an efficiency again, and trying to reduce space to maximize tomatoes, lettuce, and all the vegetables that then are typically imported from abroad and in Spain and so forth. Sustainability starts early, preschool. Critical thinking around how do I make an impact? How do I change? How do I minimize my carbon footprint? So it really is part of the culture. And I think goes back also to friluftsliv and being out and about in nature and really taking care of it and not dropping and leaving trash behind, right? That kind of thing. But really, it's a team effort here, and yeah, okay. Swedish companies, do you recognize anything? H&M, a big clothing company. Tetra Pak. Are you familiar with this? I think this is kind of a. Most of the packaged liquid that's in paper-ish is Tetra Pak. If you look at the bottom, you'll see the company Tetra Pak, and it's a huge company, global company. Did you know that Spotify is a Swedish company that we were just using? Volvo, yeah, okay. Minecraft? Did you know it was a Swedish company? All right. Have you heard of Electrolux? That actually in the U.S., their name in the U.S. is Frigidaire. Frigidaire. Yeah. So this is the parent company of Frigidaire. Saab. Do we still make Saab cars? It's been up and down. It's hard to follow. But right now, Saab is part of Scania, which it started out by producing jets, fighter jets, and now they're into big trucks, semi-trucks. Absolute Vodka, and of course, IKEA. We go to IKEA a lot. Have you been to IKEA? The two stores across? We were just there, and we were just going to pick up some stuff. Yeah, more on that later, sorry. Swedish companies in terms of trust. I thought this was kind of interesting to share. Swedish companies has a good reputation. They score very high on trust globally. And there's discussions as to why are Swedish companies trusted more than others. Well, first of all, there's a little corruption. And the fact that it's associated with quality products. And I think that's interesting. So we see Sweden up here, Canada, yeah, that's good. Okay. Germany, I mean, I think that's what symbolizes this is quality, and generally U.S. companies like to conduct business with Swedish companies. Okay. Innovation has permeated the culture for centuries. Innovation. Here are some examples of historical one. Adjustable wrench, pacemaker, the zipper. Did you know that? That apparently that was a Swedish, a Swedish-American invention. All right, okay. All right. Okay. And what else? Three-point seatbelt, which is, if you think of the seatbelt that you put on every day, that has 3 points. So it's shoulder and then on both sides. That was patented through an employee in Volvo. So we go back to safety, right? Thinking about how do you make transportation safer. Here's the adjustable wrench that I talked about. But there's history of innovation. Come on here, more. An example of an innovator is Alfred Nobel. What do you know about Alfred? Dynamite. So he was an entrepreneur and an inventor. He had a lot of patents. His biggest thing was to figure out how to make nitroglycerin into a safe product to avoid accidents, explosions, right? So that's how he made his fortune, really. Alfred Nobel. So what do you know about Nobel? The Nobel Prize, right? So we've been giving that out since 1901. In physics, can you name them? I'll be very impressed. Physics, chemistry, physiology and medicine, literature, exactly, economics, and peace prize. Why is he giving it in Norway? There is a story. Yeah. I think Alfred Nobel, some argue that he was upset with how Sweden didn't defend Norway in the World War. Well, that doesn't make sense, no. The fact that Norway was better at keeping the peace. I'm not sure. I mean, Google it. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Okay. Come on. Famous Swedes. Recognize anyone? Greta. Greta. Environment. Sustainability. Björn Borg. Tennis. Ingrid Bergman. Remember her? A couple of actors, Stellan Skarsgård, Peter Stormare. You've seen them. You're probably not paying attention to them, knowing that they're Swedes. This is the founder, Ingvar Kamprad of IKEA. And this is Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He's a soccer player. He's about to retire. I think he just retired. And he's not very much Swedish. Obviously he's a Swedish citizen, and his family's. It's an immigrant family, and what I think is interesting with Zlatan is because he's so not humble. And I think a lot of Swedish women adore him, and the Swedish men wish they could be like him. I think that's the story, really. But anyway, yeah. Unknown famous people. Do you know who this guy was? So Carl von Linné, so this is our $100 crown bill, okay? And so we put famous people like we do here in the US. What's he famous for? As a true Swede, being efficient and organized and very methodical, he came up with a system to organize namings of plants and animals. So that seems like a lot of work, right? But look him up. It's an interesting case, and yeah. Anyway, pop culture. Can we show? What's interesting with Sweden is that we produce. Not only do we have a lot of bands like ABBA, Europe, Ace of Base, Roxette. We produce a lot of. There's a lot of producers, a lot of writers, and I don't know why. But here is an example of the top, some examples of music that you'll recognize, but they're produced and written by Swedes. So that kind of makes the point, right? A lot of music that you've heard, some good, some annoying, I guess, but there's Swedes have a lot of recording studios. A lot of non-Swedish bands come to Sweden to record, I think. This is my own theory. Part of our music tradition comes in part based on the Eurovision Music Contest. Are you familiar with the Eurovision movie? I highly recommend it. But it's been 67 contests. It's the longest running music contest in the world. 67 years. 27 countries have won. Switzerland was the first one, 1956. Maybe that's why we confuse Sweden with Switzerland. I don't know. But language. So in the beginning, everybody couldn't sing in the country in language that they preferred, and we'll come back to ABBA in a bit. 1977 to 1998, language rule was imposed. So you actually had to sing in your own language. So why it was overturned, I think, was we felt unfair that the English folks, we would understand what they were singing, right? And I think also there's a commercial piece there too, right? Of if you can sing in English, everybody understands that we can promote it. Yeah, it's top countries. Ireland has won 7 times, and Sweden have won 7 times. And it's a big thing in Sweden, big thing in Europe, big family thing. Getting together, sitting and watching it as an event, and voting and cheering, and on your own country, right? And so, ABBA. Really, I think that how they got famous was through the Eurovision. In 1974, they won. They sang Waterloo. And if Dwayne's ready, I'm going to kick it in and see. Export of entertainment. I once got the question, why do I speak with an English-American accent? And why Swedes typically have an American accent rather than an English accent. And I passed that question, and we had a talk about it, and I passed that to my friends in Sweden. I think the consensus is, I think it's part because we were growing up with non-dubbed American entertainment. So we were all watching Dallas, Falcon Crest, Peaks Creek, what is it? Twin Peaks. And so that's part of why we're probably good at English too. We've been listening to English since we were kids. Did you know, though, you're familiar with the Survivor show, right? Did you know that it actually started in Sweden? And we exported it, and now it's part of... I'm running out of time, and I'm trying to figure out what else I can show here, but I think gender equality is a big piece. And I think part of it goes back to the Viking age of the gender, the fact that the women and men were battling together side by side. Astrid Lindgren is probably, well, she is the most famous writer for children's books. And symbolically enough, Pippi Longstocking, I think, is very symbolic for gender equality. You remember Pippi? Pippi Longstocking? Super strong, can lift her horse, and independent, right? No parent around. I mean, but anyway, it's a story that all Swedish kids know by heart. And I do want to end on, as we finish up, I want to end up on a celebration here. We have major holidays that some of them you understand, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. Well, okay, makes sense. It's the top, and Easter. The other one is our Midsummer Eve celebration, and that's when we dance around the maypole and having a lot of fun. But it's always on a Friday, on the last Friday, between the 19th and 25th of June. So you made a connection real quick. Yeah. So that was part of this preparation of asking my fellow friends, send me some stuff from the celebration. And they were all very helpful. And the food is very special. What we do for Midsummer is, yes, this is solstice celebration. It's about dancing, it's about drinking, it's about games, it's about love, and food. And traditionally, food on Midsummer is really, this encapsulated everything. Potato is a very important piece for Swedes. This we call fresh potato or new potato. And so we know when Midsummer is, and people plant potatoes so that they will be ready for Midsummer. So they are super fresh, right? The other piece is always here is the pickled herring. Have you tried it? Some would say it's acquired taste, right? But they're different flavors, right? But it's always there. We have sour cream, chives, and hard bread. And then we have the drinking. We have beer, and then we have snaps, nubbe. The schnapps, nubbe. This is an interesting piece. So if you ever go to Sweden and have partake in a Midsummer Eve party, or a Christmas party, or sometimes it's just a party, you might have a nubbe. And what's interesting with it is it's essentially flavored vodka, right? And during these parties, people bring their own bottle, their own recipe, family recipe that's secret, right? And then we try it. It's sort of trying a bourbons, but now we're trying different Swedish nubbe that has passed through generations. And the kicker is we sing. We sing nubbevisor. Yeah, I think we're running out of time. But what you'll find is the more we drink, the more we sing. If it's really well organized, you're going to get a little pamphlet with the songs that we're going to be singing for the night, right? Yeah, it's a long tradition. But at this point, I think I'm going to have to turn it over to Dwayne. I had a blast. I wish I had more time. I have 50 slides to go, but I ran out of time. So thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Nick. That was awesome. We're going to have some question and answers. Before we do that, we've recorded this, so it will be available through our website and Facebook page probably beginning of next week. And if you're watching at that point, and Pamela in Sweden, or Courtney, Lena, Jennifer, Andy here watching, we welcome you. I want to just briefly tell you my main image of Sweden. Went there before going to school in England for a summer, and that was awesome with good friends there. But years later, was in Turkey, and this Swedish woman and I met. She was in her 60s. I was probably in my 20s, so she had kind of a motherly, grandmotherly look on me. And we agreed to meet in Sweden later on, and she asked, do you like blonde hair, blue-eyed women? And I said, sure, absolutely. So, and I was single at the time, and she said, well, maybe I'll introduce you to some. So years later, or months later, I remember two things. One, I went to her high-rise apartment complex in downtown Stockholm, and she literally lived across the hall from Henry Kissinger. One would have thought that he lived here, but at least during that time, he lived in Stockholm, Sweden. And then the other thing is, she offhandedly said, "Oh, just so you know, I kind of put the word out about you as an American looking for some Swedish women," and so I didn't know exactly what that meant until months later. My parents in St. Louis started receiving dozens and dozens and dozens of letters, all handwritten from Swedish girls, women, ladies. So what she had done was she put an ad in a magazine called Ma Bra, Good Health.
Okay. Yep.
Ma Bra. And basically, translation loosely was young American looking for, Swedish girl, inquire within type of thing. So she put my home address in, and so this story is really for Jill, my sister-in-law, who gleefully read 125 well-written, mostly, astonishingly well-written, some like spilling their guts out and tell me all that, some just basically, do you want to meet this Friday, and then in between only 3 or 4 were like written in Swedish, as if I was going to know that, but most super well written. So that's my image of Sweden, having met some of these ladies back then. So, are you Swedish? A little bit. That's why I'm with you. So anyway, who's got a question for Nic? While we don't have a whole lot of time left, but who's got a question? And I'm going to give you the mic so everyone recording and here can hear.
Sure. You said in the beginning there are about 10 million people in Sweden, but that's thanks to immigration making up the difference. Where are the migrants coming from, and are they well received?
Great question. Sweden is probably one of the countries in Europe that are taking in more immigrants, more refugees than other countries in Europe. And so they're coming from, a lot of them coming from countries that are, there are politically persecutions and I can't speak specifically about what countries, but it is, the Middle East, a lot of it is from Southern Europe and Asia. So it's an important piece. If you would read more, I think the argument is that, yes, we're trying to integrate, we're trying to really help folks become Swedes in a way. And so we have work to do. But I think most Swedes are proud of the fact that we are probably the most welcoming country in Europe in terms of foreigners coming in. Yeah. Thank you. Was it? Yep.
I'm always amazed.
Hold on.
Francis.
Just right now, Sweden's just accepted some Kurdish refugees. And number two, Riverdance competed with ABBA, and they both have the same number of awards.
Wow. Riverdance.
Riverdance with Michael Flatley.
That's awesome.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good one. Thanks, Francis. This gentleman up here was.
I'm always amazed when I travel in earlier days through Europe, how everybody's, well, not everybody, but so many people, the language emphasized English.
Yeah.
I could go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went to China for a month, just as we opened up for tourists.
Yeah.
These little towns in the outbacks. Could you talk about the education system influenced you insisting on English?
On the English, yeah. Okay. So, Swedish, 10 million people, very difficult language, I would say pretty useless language. And so we're born, early on, television is a big influencer, I would say, in terms of getting used to English. As a kid in Sweden, you would hear English every day in one shape or form, mostly from TVs. So the shows I talked about earlier, Dallas, Falcon Crest, these, it's a big piece. Now, you saw one of my friend's daughters, what was it, 7 years old, Paola?
Perfect English.
Did you hear her English? I mean, that's the norm. Formally, we start studying English in 4th grade. So first you start with Swedish, and then you have English in 4th grade. And it goes all the way up to throughout the gymnasium. So, and then on top of that, in your 7th grade, you got to pick a 3rd language. So it's either German, Spanish, French. Those are typically it. And then in the gymnasium, you pick a 4th language. Or you continue with advanced 3rd language. So there's a lot of expectation, and part of it is we're Europe. We're small. You can travel through like 4 countries in a couple of hours sometimes, and so we need that, and that's part of, I think, the camaraderie in Europe, EU. We talk about Scandinavians. A lot of folks in Europe, they feel a lot closer these days because of EU, so they refer to themselves as Europeans. So that's become more homogeneous in a sense, right? So. Hope that answered some of your questions. But yeah, English is, I think we're number 2 in the world in terms of speaking English. I think Holland is number 1. And so, yeah. So parents are very mindful of really trying to push English because they know you need it. You need it for travel. You need it for your work. A lot of Swedish employees, when we work, it's a lot of it is in English. So parents are sending kids abroad. I went to England for 3 weeks when I was in 8th grade to learn English. Yeah. Stu?
Just one little statistic. There are more people in China that speak English than there are Americans.
I'd buy it. Yep. But what's interesting with the accent, sorry, Beth, I spent 1 year in Canada in high school as an exchange student, and part of that was the hockey thing, the hockey relationship. And I came back in the gymnasium and speaking with a Canadian accent, and which is very similar to American in a Swedish sense. My English teacher dinged me on my pronunciations because I spoke not a UK English. Anyway, yes, Beth.
No, I just wanted to emphasize a point that you made about Sweden, and that is the wealthier take care of their poor and their sick. We're in Trinity Lutheran. This is the basic tenet of the New Testament, right? The other thing is that the Swedish healthcare system for decades has been number 1 with respect to the World Health Organization, the best healthcare system in the world. The other thing about sustainability, they're so far ahead of us. We're talking about the Infrastructure Act and rebuilding our roads and bridges. They're already rebuilding roads to basically repower their public transit system. It charges up. The batteries charge up as the bus moves. They just struck a deal with NIO, which is one of the largest EV car maker in China. And now, instead of stopping to just charge up your battery and waiting for a period of time, you swap out batteries. So you can just keep going long distance. So again, they're so far ahead of us in terms of healthcare, education, and sustainability.
Thanks, Beth. Thank you. Gentleman behind. Uh-oh.
I scanned the book you brought for us to look. It's called
Yes.
Swedish Mentality.
Thank you.
And I was skim reading, and I came to page 186. Swedes' descriptions of themselves. And the Swedish respondents were asked to list 3 attributes of being Swedish. Number 1, envious. Now, pride, 9%. And nationality, 7%. Now, the question I have is, the Swedes seem to have handled the COVID business rather well. The COVID outcomes were no worse than anybody else's, but there was none of the broken crockery. You didn't close down your public schools. You didn't close down businesses and so forth. Are the Swedes taking any pride in the fact that they were so successful on that? And this lady's describing some of the wonderful things the Swedes are doing. Now this book is 30 years old, so right. I'm asking maybe things have changed.
Yeah. Great question. I was here during COVID, and we had ongoing conversation, myself with my Swedish friends and family, about how the Swedes were essentially not quarantining, shutting down. All they were doing is counting the beds available. That was all about the curve. Can we take care? As long as we have enough hospital beds, we're not shutting down the system. And so, as you remember, I mean, there were times where the Swedes, they were in trouble. And so that's when they sort of backed off, but it was a conversation back and forth. And I think in the end, yeah, I think they would say, well, we did pretty well. You know, we didn't shut down as much as other countries, and I think economically, I think they did okay. But yeah, pride is, yeah.
Is it rising in Sweden?
Sorry?
Being proud of being a Swede?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it goes back to my fundamental point of culture is unquestionable. You know, I think we all are proud, at least when we start talking to other nations, about what we do. Like we, as in the U.S., we do a lot of things really, really well, you know. And so, yeah.
All right, very good. We're going to wrap things up there. Please stick around. Nick and Devin are going to be here in case you want to ask some more questions. And
Can I
want to do 2 things. Please explain what the treats are that you made, and if you could do it in Swedish so we can hear you.
Okej. Så mina damer och herrar, jag har bakat ett par kakor och vi kallar det för kladdkaka. Det är en traditionsenlig dessert som är byggd på socker, ägg, smör, vanilj, ägg och lite salt. Och den är bakad och den ska vara undercooked. Så att den är sticky, en kladdig alltså. Okay? So what I just told you was kladdkaka. I told you about the ingredients. And do you want to know the ingredients in English? So egg, did you hear it? Could you figure it out? Egg, vanilla. So essentially it's a sticky brownie. Okay, but I think the kicker here is there's a little bit of vanilla extract in it. So that's what makes it, I think, different from a regular brownie. So if you taste it, if you don't like vanilla, it's not for you. But I think it's an interesting, and it goes back to Swedes and coffee drinking. Swedes are, who's the #1 country in the world in terms of drinking coffee per capita? What do you think?
Sweden.
Good answer. It's not. No. Finland. Finland. I think we're second or third. I'm not sure why we're high up there. Maybe it's the darkness and the melancholy and the depression. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so Swedes religiously drink 10 o'clock, at noon, and 2 o'clock. And a lot of it is coffee meetings. And it's a big deal. And some ways it's required of coffee. But so we prepared a little sample of kladdkaka, sticky cake, that everybody eats. Kids come home from school at 3 o'clock, and they're making it, and it's a thing to eat before dinner. But I hope you enjoy it. And we also have a sample. I brought a alcohol called punch, Swedish punch, and it's a dessert wine, kind of porty, but it's very, very classic. It's not strong. It's 22% alcohol, and it's typically served with coffee and dessert on a nicer dinner. It's not a regular thing, but it's typically they typically serve it warm. So yeah, hope you enjoy that. So.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay.
And to be honest, when you were speaking Swedish, it kind of sounded like you were just making things up.
How did it sound? Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, please stick around. We're going to socialize. And last thing, I did forget to mention that my brother, Scott, is in Stockholm as we speak right now, attending Ethno Sweden. It's a music festival, so hello to him. So anyway, thank you very much for coming, everybody, and please give Nick a warm applause. Thank you.
Thank you.